Immediately following episode 1 of this old sled a month ago, Reese messaged me some pictures and the story of this sled you see pictured here. And I was very grateful for that, because that like literally the basis of my podcast is getting these stories from the listeners. But it is quite the interesting story, and volume 1 we're going to title The Sled That Came Home. So let me pop that full screen and get my notes up here. We'll get that started. Okay. Hey, Eric, your podcast inspired me to share a story about a sled I own. It is a 1970 Ski-Doo 12.3, and I've had this sled for many years. I haven't run it since 2015. I hope to get it up and running again. A rusty tank, a not so good track, and a lack of time have prevented me from working on it. Anyway, here's a story and some pictures from the late 90s and from 2014 when I did have it going for a while. Picked up this 70 Olympique 12.3, but there is a little story on it. Searching around Craigslist for a vintage bubble hood do for my friend Mark Messi, I ran across this sled. Didn't really pay much mind to it, and I tossed it in my bookmarks folder to save it for later. I messaged it to Mark thinking he might be interested. We got talking about another sled that's local, and this sled came up in our convo. So I looked at the ad a little closer, and some things started to become really familiar about it. As you can see, it's a very basic Olympic with no front bumper. Also, it has a brown seat cover on it. So I dig out some old photos, and lo and behold, I used to own this sled. I purchased it from a guy I worked with when I lived in Buffalo. The engine was apart in a box, and the front drivers were toast. Fall of 1999, I moved back home to Tupper Lake. I fixed the drivers and reassembled the engine. Why it was apart, I have no idea. I ran the piss out of the sled for the 1999 to 2000 season, and then again in the 2000 to 2001 season. I loved the sled, and it ran like a top. I never had a problem with it. I ran into some hard times in the spring of 2001, and unfortunately, I had to put it on the lawn for sale. I ended up selling it to a guy from Canton, New York, who was a traveling salesman who sold pharmaceuticals to local drugstores. He also had a farm in the Canton area. He was looking for a machine to use on the farm. We loaded it up and never seen it again until I saw this Craigslist ad. I contacted the guy in Madrid who says he bought this one and another one from a farm down the street, and it was in the loft of a barn. It looks like he may have switched the hood with another 70 hood, as it's not the same one I sold it with. But this one is in much better shape. So after 14 years, I got back one of the best sleds I have ever owned. I'm hoping it will still run as good as it did then. The last 7 photos are of the sled when I owned it in 2000 to 2001. I had installed a 340 TNT motor in it for a little while with a custom pipe from a TXL. That little do would shit and get. I sold the TNT motor separate and sold the Olympic with the original engine. The picture of the kid on the sled is my oldest son. He will be 30. He was 30, just turned 30 this month in July. So yeah, once again, I just want to thank Reese. The pictures are wrapping up here. I read it a little too quickly, but yeah, that is the perfect sled story. And I really am hoping to, lean on the vintage sled community to be able to do the same kind of thing. And, we talk a lot about Ski-Doos because that's what we're into, but this podcast is definitely all inclusive. I don't want it to just be about Ski-Doos. I want it to feature all the brands and what everybody likes. And, as we saw the Thunderjet, I was so grateful to hear that story. But, follow me on all my socials, and you can see in the bottom right corner here, share your stories here, thisoldsled@gmail.com. That's a good spot. Or you can find me on Facebook, Ben Adim, and do it through Messenger. It's probably the 2 best options, but I look forward to hearing your stories, seeing your pictures, and we can really lean on each other to keep this podcast going month after month. So let's bring everybody back. Let's see. I'll get it eventually, everybody. Yeah, it's funny. We've known Reese for several years now, and I never heard that story. And ironically, this comment has nothing to do with it, but that's in his profile picture on YouTube is that sled. And as soon as I saw that picture, I was like, aha, I get it now. But yeah, it's funny because I know in the first podcast where we talked about the sled that made people fall in love with vintage snowmobiles, the 12.3 got 2 or 3 hits. It is a very popular sled, and to this day, it still seems to be.